12,000 miles, probably even a little more than that, and 23 sketchbook pages. Those are the stats of my September travels, but today I want to tell you the story. So grab a cuppa and sit back and relax and let me take you on a little artsy journey. I've got my laptop here to give me some visual reminders of everything that happened because, well, a lot happened. I packed so much into 3 weeks. Plus, when I got back, 3 days later, I went to the Isle of Skye for 4 days. So technically I was gone for a month. And it has taken me basically an entire month to recover. When I got back, I also had a bunch of deadlines, so I had to just dive right back into work, and now I'm finally resurfacing. So thank you for your patience over the last few weeks as I get back to normal life. If you're new here, my name is Sarah, and I paint outside. I live in Scotland, and I went back to the US to visit my family and friends and take a workshop with Mike Hernandez. It was a gouache plein air workshop. It was fabulous, but I'm going to tell you that story in a bit. I don't like to fly. Let's start with that. So knowing that I had 8 or 9 flights during the course of this 3 weeks really put the fear in me. I was having a bit of anxiety before I left about that. Plus, I was packing lots of different supplies. Honestly, I put myself through a bit of torture when I was planning for this trip. And it was needless because, as you'll see while I was traveling, I ended up going with some very simple supplies. Later in the video, I'm also going to share some lessons learned, not only about art, but also travel. I've been sharing daily posts over on Instagram of all of my sketchbook pages, and I also did a full sketchbook flip through over on my Patreon if you want to watch that. So let's go back to September 11th when we left Scotland. We traveled from our house over to Aberdeen, straight to the airport, and we flew down to London. And that's when the fun started. By fun, I mean after we landed, they held us on the plane for an hour, so we missed our next flight. Second we got off the plane, we ran to the help desk and just begged them to just figure out how to get us to New York. And the funny thing is, we actually were planning to fly into Philly and drive up to New York. The whole point of that was to avoid a really long, pointless layover. We figured just get in the car and drive. At least it feels like we're making progress then. So because we missed our connecting flight, I lost the money that we had paid to rent the car because it was too last minute to cancel. But they did book us on a flight to JFK. As we were boarding that flight to JFK, I was on my phone desperately searching for a flight from JFK to my dad's town. So it was like kind of a whirlwind at the last second, but I got one. So we were on our way, finally. I think we finally arrived to my dad's house at like 10 p.m. or something. After 3 flights, lots of delays, lots of airport torture. And as a nervous flyer, I was also just in a bad physical state. So I just crashed, slept really well that night, and woke up to a beautiful morning. And my dad has this lovely little porch on the front of the house. You could sit out there with coffee, just enjoying the sounds of nature, and also lots of barking dogs because he has 4 border collies. So we chilled out at my dad's house. I sketched a little bit. So later that day, we headed to the camp. That's what we call it. It's my dad's woodland property, basically in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. It's just wonderful because once you're there, you're surrounded by trees and nature. There's beautiful ponds, and it was just starting to turn autumn colors, so it was just gorgeous. And I don't know how we got so lucky, but the entire time we were there, it was gorgeous, perfect weather. So I just couldn't stop photographing and filming. And I also took time to obviously hang out and just relax. And I did a little bit of sketching. But the reason we were there, obviously it's beautiful and just a good place to hang out, but also to prepare for his annual music party he does every year. Not only is my dad a very skilled engineer and he built a lot of the structures on his property, but he's also a musician. So every autumn he throws a big music party and invites other bands, invites other musicians. Lots of friends and family come, and it's just a really fun day in the woods with music, hanging out, eating great food. Everyone brings food. It's a potluck. While we're there, we're staying in a tent. I love camping, especially when it's not at like a public campsite. So this is obviously my dad's private land, so it's just the most peaceful way to camp. We can just do whatever we want while we're there. We can ride around on the gator, or I can sketch and drink and eat really good food and just be merry.
Oh, Kansas City, here I come, you know Kansas City, here I come. You find gonna give me one tree. Find me on the corner, 12th and Vine. I'll be right on the corner, 12th Street and Vine. With a Kansas City hit, cheap rock, Kansas City wine.
So we spent a week in upstate New York hanging out, just having fun. It was like basically the vacation part of my travels. And then after that week, Wolfie went back home to Scotland because we only had a cat sitter for about a week, which was a whole other ordeal. We actually had like 3 or 4 different people looking after the cats in that span of time, which was a bit stressful, but it ended up being fine in the end. They were happy and healthy. And so anyway, Wolfie went back home and I continued my travels to the other side of the country. I flew from New York to Seattle and started my art section of the travels. Now, here's one of the lessons learned from this trip. I do this pretty much every time I travel as well, so I don't know if I'll ever learn. But if I go somewhere and I see an opportunity to fit something in, like a meetup or an event of some kind, or I don't know, just something cool and fun, I will fit it in. And I plan these things months ahead. So by the time the day arrives and I fly across the country, I stand in line forever waiting for my rental car, I crash in a hotel, and then the next morning I wake up and have to go to a meetup with like 30 people. And I'm still jet lagged and I'm in a new city, in a very crazy city, by the way. Driving in Seattle is mental. I can't just not do it. So that's what happened. I scheduled a meetup with lots of my viewers and followers. And if someone out there is watching this who came to the event, say hi in the comments. It ended up being amazing, by the way. I'm just saying this. It's like a lesson learned not to pack so much in such a short time. I should have given myself at least one extra day to kind of get there, relax, get my bearings, kind of figure out where I am, just ease into it, I think. I just was jamming so much in. And so basically the day after I got to Seattle, it was like this whirlwind. It was definitely one of those times that tested my resilience, but ended up proving to myself like, yeah, I can do it. So I made it to the city finally and arrived at this cool location where the Chihuly Glass Garden is, and the Space Needle, and a bunch of museums, a bunch of cool structures. Wandered around, lost for a while, and finally I came across this grassy area and there were a bunch of people sitting around, but it was in an area near where I was going to meet, so I actually thought it was a different group. But then a few of them were like, Sarah, and I realized, oh, it's my people. So finally we found each other in the city and we wandered around a bit and then finally found a little area to sit and sketch, a bunch of tables. It was a really beautiful location, if not a bit touristy, but that was kind of the point because I knew I would only be there like in Seattle for a day. I wanted to kind of see this iconic thing, the Space Needle. I tried to sketch a little bit, but it was almost impossible because I was also trying to get around and talk to every single person. And because there were like almost 30 people there, that was really challenging. But I think I pretty much got to talk to everyone and it was really fun. People came from all over the place. Even Jane, shout out to Jane, she's 91, she's been my patron forever, and she made her way to the city. Her friend helped her get there, and we got to meet finally. So that was amazing. It's little stories like that I will remember forever. And actually, it almost makes me tear up a little bit thinking about it, because there are so many wonderful people in the world, and it's kind of easy to forget that when you read the news and you are confronted with things that are not so nice. But then you meet up with these kind of people who are like-minded, enthusiastic artists, love sketching, love painting outside. We had so much fun geeking out about art supplies. Everyone was kind of showing their kits and their sketchbooks. After a few hours painting together and chatting, we all threw our sketchbooks down and got to see what everyone was up to. And during that time, because I didn't really give myself enough time to sketch, I decided to just ask people to sign my sketchbook page. So I had started the Space Needle sketch. It was all crazy and not finished. So I was like, why don't I just have everyone sign this? It's almost like sign my yearbook. And they did. So now I have this beautiful spread in my sketchbook. All the signatures are there. It's just such a good memory. Every time I flip through it, it just brings me right back to that. I'm here in Seattle, near the Space Needle, meeting up with a huge group of amazing artists. I'm gonna try not to trip while I walk backwards. So many wonderful sketchers came to meet up. Say hi. Hi.
Down.
Puppy
I guess we
approved.
can go that way. Sure. There we go.
I've seen this done on Teo's channel.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of the urban sketcher groups do this.
It's neat.
It's so cool.
Keep mine away, but that's all right.
Big old collage. Oh yes, more's coming.
I think we need a plein air
I'm gonna zoom around.
Well, there's an urban sketchers group for sure. There's got to be a plein air group. Urban sketchers was started in Seattle. Yeah. We're the founders.
I wonder. I recorded. It's a video. Sorry. So obviously you can see I'm just like beaming. It was a great day. But I had to leave the city by like 2 p.m.-ish and head up the road to the ferry to Whidbey Island because that's where my workshop with Mike Hernandez was. In retrospect, I should have scheduled a whole day for the meetup instead of, again, cramming everything into a short amount of time. But it ended up being fine. It was just a lot. I was very, very tired by the time I arrived to Whidbey Island. And then I had one extra day the following day to relax. On Whidbey Island, I was staying with one of my best friends. They have a beautiful house there with an amazing view. Oh my gosh, that view is incredible. Whidbey Island is just off the coast of Washington, and a lot of people say that whole area is very similar to Scotland in climate especially, but also in kind of the geology and the flora and the fauna. So I had been there once before, so I kind of knew that. And it does remind me very much of Scotland in some ways, but it's also unique. One of the things is obviously you have the massive pine trees or the evergreen trees. I don't know which ones they are exactly, but they're just like twice or three times as big as what we have in Scotland. So I love, like, as I was driving to my friend's house on Whidbey, you're just surrounded by these amazing trees, and that instantly was just like a warm hug. And of course, once I was at my friend's house, we have so much fun together, and their house overlooks the water and the mountains in the distance. It's just always so stunning. So provides a lot of inspiration. And again, we had perfect weather the entire weekend. And it was a 3-day workshop with Mike Hernandez. If you don't know who that is, on Instagram, he goes as Squatch Squash. I'll put the little tag so you can see the name. Go follow him. He's incredible. I had been wanting to do a workshop with him for years. I had taken one of his online like 2-day workshops before, so I kind of had a feel for his teaching style, but being with an instructor in person is 1,000 times better. Plus it was a beautiful location and I was staying with my best friend, so it's just obviously the best things combined. But that first day that we met up as a group, he started the day with a lecture about composition and values and actually so many things, but those are the two main things we focused on. He also does a lot of illustration or design for animation and movies, so like Pixar, for instance, and does a lot of art direction. And then that afternoon, we all went to the coast and just painted the views. He painted his demo while we all painted, and he walked around and kind of gave us all tips and stuff. But his knowledge goes so far beyond just how to use gouache or how to use any kind of paint. My whole goal for going to this workshop was to get a little bit of insight into how he sees the environment and interprets it into a painting. He's really strong in design, in color, I mean, all the important things, but also just capturing the feeling of a place. Some of his work almost seems abstract at times, but it's still figurative. Like it's a really beautiful blend of all the things I love. And it's definitely more along the lines of what I'm trying to achieve in my work. I love abstract art. I love representational art, but bridging those two is very challenging. So I know I need the technical skills, which I work on all the time because I just paint so often, but I feel like I don't devote enough time to the design. And that's the biggest thing I took away from his workshop, is learning how to see and translate it to a painting, not necessarily just translating what you see to 2D, don't copy it line for line, but actually creating something beautiful from your experience there. That was probably a long-winded way of explaining that, but yeah, it was just a beautiful first day in the workshop on the coast, and I did a couple little studies but really just wanted to soak in his process. So pretty much any time he was painting, I was watching him because I felt like that's what I was paying for. I can go outside and paint all the time here. I did like the fact that I could paint and then he could give me some tips, but I wasn't as focused on creating anything good. I was more focused on taking notes of what he was talking about and demonstrating. Obviously, my notes included my own little paintings. It's like painting notes. And he was able to give me feedback on some of the stuff, which was great. But again, I was really wanting to spend as much time as I could just observing him. I guess that's another lesson learned, or not a lesson learned, but like a thing that I wanted to mention about going to workshops. I think it's important not to want to copy an artist while you're at the workshop, but to really take in their mindset and how they see things, how they interpret things. The technical skills will come. The more you paint, the more you'll get better at the technical skills. The best thing you could do is just watch. Even if they aren't explaining every single step of the way, while you watch them mix, while you watch them apply it to the paint, and especially while you watch them develop a painting from start to finish, and seeing their little mistakes that they have to correct and all the decisions they make along the way is so incredibly valuable. At least that's how I see it. So let's move on to day 2. Again, it was a gorgeous morning, beautiful sunrise, and we spent the whole morning at a farm. It was a beautiful old barn and a big property, expansive views beyond with the mountains and everything. I mean, it was so picturesque. So he started off with a demo, and I think it took him maybe about an hour or so to do his demo, maybe an hour and a half, which was wonderful to watch. And that's kind of a subject that I would maybe shy away from, especially first thing in the morning. Like usually I try to ease into something like that. Watching him just sit down, get cracking on it, paint this beautiful scene in like an hour, hour and a half was so inspiring. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I did my own little barn. Although my view was much smaller than what he did, I still learned so much, even just about, little tips like using a bit of warmth on this one edge just to differentiate it from this edge, or the light's catching this thing so it will have a slightly different hue to it. All these little tips that you just pick up while watching an artist do a demo. So wonderful. And I actually really liked my result, although I think I would like to paint it again larger with more detail because mine was pretty small. I could only pack so much detail into such a small piece. It's also fun at a workshop to walk around and see what everyone else is doing. A lot of people were using oil, some people were using acrylic. It was a wide variety, so I really enjoyed that, and all different skill levels as well. After a little lunch and coffee break, we met up again down by the shore near where Mike was staying at his hotel. And it was, again, a beautiful sunny afternoon, so there was really lovely, strong light coming through the trees, kind of spilling over the shore. There's bright, almost neon green seaweed just lit up by the sun. It was a really unique, cool spot. And I felt very playful and I just wanted to experiment a little. So I started off my sketches with a pink background, kind of like a bright pink, and then painted on top of it. So I knew it would have that pink undertone, and I used a lot of very cool mixes on top of it to kind of play off of that. So it was a fun experiment, and I definitely learned a lot. And Mike also did another little demo, but for the most part, everyone was just painting their own thing. And then while he was sketching, he would take a little break and kind of walk around and give feedback, which was great. And one of the things he mentioned is that he notices I use a lot of blue in my shadows. And I was like, oh yeah, I know. It's like my go-to thing, blue and purple. He was encouraging me to kind of branch out a little and try different mixes, gray mixes and things like that, so that I'm not only relying on the blue, so that if it's a choice, great, but otherwise I need to build the confidence to try different colors in my shadows. And I was like, yes, that is exactly what I needed to hear. And I was very sensitive to the grays that I was using in my mixes after that point. The next morning, we started at the harbor in Langley, and wow, what a morning. It was beautiful mist, bright sunshine, and actually it created a glare on the water, which I see all the time in Scotland. So I was very keen to watch how Mike did his demo, how he handled that kind of lighting. Something that I really enjoy about his process is that he just goes for it. He does a little sketch, but he mostly just starts with a tonal painting and then paints right on top of that. And he's also very sensitive to tiny little shifts of color and how they play off of each other. I think the painting he did that morning was my favorite of the entire weekend of his. It just sang so beautifully and told the story of that morning.
The boat underneath looks like a dry brush, just one flat dry brush, just a shape. The boat that's going straight out in front of it, the reflection under it looks like a dry brush, one single.
Birds.
Bird? Really?
Yeah.
What kind of bird?
My daughter keeps facing Whidbey.
Oh, yeah.
Not very heavy.
So after a while of being there, I was pretty mentally drained. So I ended my sketching session like a little bit earlier than the others and just drank some coffee, kind of walked around and watched what people were doing, sketched a little bit, but mostly I just was like recovering mentally. So I enjoyed that morning. That's another little lesson for you, that it's okay not to paint the entire time while you're at a workshop. It's okay to just observe and just be there. And, you know, painting that intensely for so many hours is very mentally draining. To me, there's no point in forcing yourself to do one thing after another when half of it just, I feel like so much value comes from just witnessing what others are doing. You don't get that every day. Like being with other artists like that, and especially someone so amazing as Mike, to me, that, again, I keep repeating this, but that's where a lot of the value is for me. However, after a little break, I did get kind of excited by a little scene that I saw unfolding in front of me. Some kayakers hopped in the water and went sailing across the water, and it was very still at that time, so they were creating these long moving lines in the water. It was really cool. So I decided to do a quick little sketch. I was so tired at that point, so I just went really playful with it. And the funny thing is, at that time I was like, oh, this is probably the worst thing I've done all weekend. But after a day or two, and especially after being back and like seeing all my sketches together, I really like that one because it was like the most free I felt while I was painting. I was very abstract, and also when I posted it on Instagram and shared it elsewhere, it got such a strong positive response, and people said they absolutely loved the abstract quality of the background and the feeling of it. It just was very fresh and very cool. And so I was laughing to myself thinking, why is it always that the pieces I think will be received the worst, thinking they're too sketchy, they're too abstract, they're not as good as my other stuff? Why are those ones always the ones that end up being loved? And like something that I'll spend ages on and take a lot of time and do lots of detail on gets like a response, like, yeah, cool, nice. It makes me think that there's something about that abstract quality that makes us a bit excited and interested, and we have to kind of put the pieces together in our mind as a viewer. Anyway, it's just an interesting thought, and yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. So after a lunch break, we went to another location. It was like a pretty little pond surrounded by a forest. I actually wasn't super inspired by this location. I didn't think it was really interesting at all, but I did find a dead tree, and I'm always going to be happy with a dead tree. So that was my subject. And I mean, Mike ended up doing this lovely little painting. He found like the one tree that had autumn color on it and a reflection, and it was really nice. But I just was not feeling it. So I did some sketching, pencil sketching, one little gouache study. But mostly that whole afternoon, I watched Mike, I walked around and I watched other artists and just kind of soaked it all in, really, and had some good chats with people. It was a very nice way to end the weekend for me. It wasn't overwhelming. Like I enjoyed that afternoon as a very relaxing setting. I was a bit bummed that was over and I like wished we had one more day together, but I think that's always going to be the case with a workshop. You always want a little bit more. Let's see. So that was the last day of the workshop. And after that, I hung out with another friend on the island and stayed at her house, which was really fun. But I had the whole day the next day to make my way back to the airport, which I think was too much time. I wish I had booked the flight earlier in the day, but I had until like 7 p.m. the next day. And I thought it would take me way longer to get over the ferry, through the city, to the airport. But anyway, I ended up going to REI and killing some time and a couple other places. Oh, actually, I bought this shirt there. This is my memory shirt of the trip. But I was heading to the airport to fly over to my brother's house on the other side of Washington and stay with them for a few days. Some of you already know my brother from his YouTube channel about geology and faceting. He does all sorts of cool stuff on his channel. I've mentioned him a few times in the past. But it was just really fun to see him, his wife, their baby. Well, she's 2 or 3 now. Oh my goodness. She's so cute though. I was only at his house for a few days, so most of it was just spent at his place with my niece. Lots of hanging out and playing games and doing things that little toddlers like to do. So it was fun. That was also very tiring. Pat and Morgan, you guys are rock stars. Parents in general, more power to you. I couldn't do it. We did go on one little adventure into the desert, driving around beautiful canyons, and the Columbia River Basin is pretty close to there. I don't know all of the geology of the area, and my brother was kind of giving me little lessons about some of it here and there, but I was just excited to paint it. So after we hiked up to this little viewpoint at one of the canyons, I painted a little gouache study of the view. And as I was painting it, I was like, this is going to be the subject for my October paint along after I get back. And I was so excited about it. So I mostly did that study as color notes and as like a little kind of introduction to the view for myself, knowing that I was going to paint it again in more detail with my patrons. And it was so fun. We just did that paint along last weekend. Went great. When I look back at these photos and videos, I still just can't believe the colors. The colors there are so different to what I'm used to. Deserty colors. It's like the opposite of Scotland. That was a really fun little lesson for me when I was painting there. Seeing such a different color palette and trying to be very sensitive to the subtle grays and browns and yellows and the things that I was seeing and not going overly saturated with it. Even though I love adding color, I love to boost it a little bit. There were so many little cool details that I wanted to paint. I could have spent days painting there, but it was really, really hot and dry. And I mean, yeah, I would melt, but I got lots of reference. So I'm going to be painting some of that in the coming months here in the studio. It's always fun hiking with my brother because he knows so much about geology and he can give me little lessons, and I tend to forget a lot of it pretty quick, but I have so much fun in the moment. So after a few days of hanging out with them, I flew back to Seattle. I gave myself a small buffer of time between getting back to Seattle and then flying back to the UK, just in case like my flight from the other side of Washington got delayed and I had to drive, or I don't know, I just needed to give myself a little extra time. But when I got back to Seattle, the Airbnb I had booked had no power, and it turned out that whole area, the power was down and they had no idea when it would be back on, and I was desperate for a shower, and I had a box of mac and cheese that I wanted to make. I was so tired, so over it. So I found a hotel on booking.com, Ubered over to the new hotel. Even though I got the confirmation email and everything went through on my card, when I got to that hotel, they said they didn't have a record of me being a guest. 30 minutes later, I got a booking declined message from booking.com saying the hotel wasn't accepting bookings. So that was fun. So I Ubered to a different hotel, and luckily that one accepted me. And I just needed like to sleep somewhere. I was so tired at that point. And thankfully I made like last call in their restaurant, so I got some food and then just crashed. I was so tired. The next day I made my way back to the airport and I had a few hours to kill there. I wanted to get there really early to make sure all my bags, everything was all fine, and flew to London. And that is an overnight flight. It leaves in the afternoon in Seattle and arrives at 7 a.m. the next day in London. I think it's like a 9-hour flight, 8 hours, 9 hours, something. A way too long flight. I had arrived in London. I was there at 7 a.m. after not sleeping on the plane because the girl next to me, her arms were like in my seat as well as the guy on the other side. She had the person in the middle. She just like, yeah. And there was a little kid in front of me screaming and kicking the entire time. So no sleep for me. It was one of those nightmare flights that I was just like, I can't wait for this to be over. After landing in London, I had the full day ahead of me and I hadn't slept, so I was extremely tired. And I thought I was actually getting sick at that point because just traveling and being so tired, my throat was getting a little sore. I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make it through a whole day before I get to my hotel? I got an Uber from the airport to the area that my hotel was in because I was that tired. I didn't want to deal with public transportation and then like get it wrong or have something get delayed. And I was beyond my limit, my tired limit. So yeah, it was an expensive Uber, but it was worth it because the person did a couple little like detours for me in the city and showed me some of the beautiful architecture. It wasn't my first time in London, but it was my first time seeing certain areas. And it was so cool. It really woke me up and got me in a really good mood. So I ended up getting to the area where my hotel was and was like, why not? I'll just go in and see if they'll let me like at least keep my bags there because some hotels do that and maybe even check in early. That was a pretty big ask to get checked in that early when normal check-in is like 3 or 4 p.m. But I went in and they said if I sign up for their free like loyalty program, they will let me check in for free that early. Otherwise, it's like 50 pounds. It's like, heck yeah, I'll do that. I don't care. So I checked in early, put my bags, had a quick shower. It was so nice. And I laid down for like half an hour. But I didn't want to fall asleep because then I knew it would be way harder to get over my jet lag. Got up, went and got a coffee, and went out to paint. And that was a really good decision because it was a beautiful sunny day. It was a little chilly, but not terrible. And the architecture in London is just fascinating to me. It's such a huge mix of very, very old with very, very new, that old and contemporary right next to each other. It's just fascinating. So a really fun city to walk around and photograph and sketch. And because I was there like at the tail end of tourist season, it wasn't too bad, although it was still very crowded. I can't imagine what it's like in the middle of the summer. I would never want to go there then. But I just walked up and down various streets, made my way over to the St. Paul's Cathedral and sketched that for a little while. Then I made my way back over the river and sketched at the Shakespeare Globe. It's like they rebuilt Shakespeare's Globe, the stage that he performed at, I guess. They rebuilt it to look the way it used to look. So it was really cool. I liked that building, and it was nestled in between a bunch of other things, but pretty crowded area too. I think by then it was 4 p.m. After all of that walking and sketching, I was utterly exhausted, done, going back to the hotel. I am done. So made my way back to the hotel. I ordered Japanese food, which was such a treat. Got delivered to the hotel, took it up to my room. I love treating myself to food that I can't normally get, at least where I live in Scotland. So Japanese food especially is one of my go-to things. Vegetarian sushi. I think I fell asleep at like 7 or 8 p.m. and slept until about 2 a.m. and woke up wide awake, ready to go. Jet lag sucks. I think I fell asleep at 5 a.m. again and then woke up at 8. But I was rested enough because that day was my London meetup. I had scheduled this, again, just like the Seattle meetup, months ahead of time. So sent out a newsletter blast. Whoever wanted to could just come and join us to sketch. And it was so much fun. One of the people who came is another YouTuber, Sketches and Scrubs. I have been in contact with her over the years online, and finally we got to meet in person. Sketches already put out a video about the experience on her channel. Definitely go watch it if you haven't already. It's a lot of fun. A couple of them were from my Patreon, and one of them actually was someone who came to my workshop I did in Scotland here in the coastal town nearby. Because it was a smaller group, it was a lot easier to chat with everyone while also sketching. So I actually got a few sketches in, which was great. We wandered around for a while until we came to the Tower Bridge, one of the iconic spots in London, and I spent quite a long time doing a detailed sketch. And then next to that is the Tower of London, so I painted that. It's one of the oldest structures, I think, in London. Everyone else was sketching their own thing, similar views from the same spot, but after we sketched for a while, I think like a couple hours, we were freezing. So we put our sketchbooks down to kind of see what everyone had been doing, and that is also really fun to get a taste for the variety of artists that are there. And after that, we definitely needed to stretch our legs a bit because it was cold and we had been sitting there for a while. We decided to walk across Tower Bridge, which is kind of crazy, and it was very windy that day, so it was even more so. And we made our way over to this little harbor. I think it's called St. Catherine's or something like that. It's kind of a pricey touristy spot, but there was this really, really old ship there that I wanted to see. And we just hung out, chatting, walking around there, taking photos. But then pretty much everyone except Sketches and Scrubs left, and we decided to have a little date night at the harbor. So we sat down for some really amazing Turkish food while we sketched the boat. It was the perfect viewpoint from our little table, which was so much fun, and just chatted. We spent ages chatting about YouTube and the algorithm and life as an artist, and Sketches is also a doctor, so it was just a lot of fun to talk. And I mean, it feels like we could talk for days on end. We stayed at that little restaurant and sketched until it was just too dark, and then finished our meal and had to walk back to where Sketches was going to get the train home and towards my hotel as well. It was a nice way to end the day, to see Tower Bridge all lit up like that, and just the city in general looking so good. And the next day was the day I was flying back to Scotland. I had a bit of time to kill, so I decided to go to the Natural History Museum and spend the day there. So I checked out of my hotel, got an Uber to the Natural History Museum. Again, good choice because the driver made a little detour so I could see, Buckingham Palace and a couple of other cool things. And it was raining disgusting that day, so I knew I just wanted to be inside somewhere. So the Natural History Museum is a really cool spot for that. I knew I wanted to sketch a little bit and decided what better way and what better subject than extinct birds and dinosaurs. So I spent hours walking around, taking in all of the different exhibits, standing around in the corners sketching. Quite a few people stopped to watch me sketch for a while. It was just a ballpoint pen sketch because I didn't have, I was standing while sketching. I'm not going to have my paint kit out. And I wanted to move between the exhibits really quickly. Ballpoint pen was perfect for that. The dinosaur section was quite dark, so I could only get a little bit of sketching in during that, in that area. But otherwise, I basically had until, I think it was 4 or 5 p.m. 4 p.m. to sketch and hang out there. And then I made my way back to the airport, got a late night flight home to Inverness. And it was like an hour drive from Inverness Airport to where I live. I was dying to see my kitties again. And that is the story of my 12,000 mile, 23-page sketchbook adventure. So I hope you all enjoyed this little story time. Let me know if you were there at any of the meetups. Say hi in the comments, please. And now that I am kind of getting back into the swing of things, I will hopefully have more regular videos for you all. But I really appreciate your patience and understanding. It's been challenging to get back, but I'm here. So again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.